Gotta help me out here, bro.
This video was released on the final day of 2021 AD, that is, Anno Domini, the year of our Lord, the year, by a misguided medieval reckoning, since the nativity of Jesus. AD and its alter ego CE are so familiar that they seem indispensable, and it can be easy to assume that the Greeks and Romans used something similar. This, however, is not the case. Counting years is by no means a universal custom. Most historical societies had calendars key to the cycles of the sun and moon, which served to mark the agricultural seasons, situate festivals, and establish a temporal frame for public business. But relatively few societies have counted years the way we do. The ancient Greeks certainly did not. During the classical period, almost every Greek city had its own dating system, just as it had its own calendar and laws. In Athens, for example, an official called the eponymous Archon gave his name to the year. At Sparta, the year was named after one of the Ephors. At Argos, the priestess of Hera had that honor. The dizzying array of dating conventions created headaches for ancient Greek historians, who had to either pick a single dating system, like the Athenian Archon lists, or craft cumbersome synchronisms. It was possible, however, to build long-term chronologies. Perhaps the most famous example is the Parian Marble, an inscribed chronicle recording events from 1582 to 298 BC. The best-known Greek attempt at a systematic chronology was the Olympiad system, pioneered by the historian Timaeus and systematized by Eratosthenes in the 3rd century BC. This system dated events in relation to the Olympic Games, which had been held every 4 years since, by Eratosthenes' calculations, our 776 BC. An event that took place in 480 BC was thus the year of the 75th Olympiad. The Olympiad system was useful for historians, but it never became standard like the modern AD system, and it seems to have never been referenced in daily life. The only Greek dating system remotely similar to AD was the system used by the Seleucids, the dynasty that inherited the vast central block of Alexander's empire. The first year of the Seleucid era corresponded to our 312 to 311 BC and commemorated Seleucus I's conquest of Babylon. The Seleucid era was used throughout the Near East and long outlasted the Seleucids themselves. It persisted, in fact, beyond the Arab conquests and was used until the 20th century by the Yemeni Jewish community. Like the Greeks, the Romans dated their years by annual magistrates, in their case, the 2 ordinary consuls, who took office, by the imperial era, on January 1st. For formal and legal purposes, it was...
Can you imagine, instead of saying 2019, you say the 3rd year of Trump, 2021, the 1st year of Biden? I don't even know if you would say numbers. You would just say Biden 3, Trump 2, Clinton 7.
Customary to name both consuls. More casually, only one might be mentioned. For example, the famously good wine produced in 121 BC was conventionally called Opimian wine, after Opimius, one of that year's consuls. Consular dating remained standard throughout Roman history. Roman scholars, however, sometimes referenced what we call ab urbe condita dates, counting the years since the foundation of Rome. There was never a definitive date. Then as now, historians disagreed about such things, but most scholars thought that Rome had been founded around 750 BC. The date calculated by the polymath Varro, 753 BC, was the most widely accepted. Like the Olympiad system, dating from the foundation of Rome was...
Do you think he just sat there and counted it all? He just went up to that rock and just started counting the magistrates, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. He's had to start over all the time. So it makes him a polymath.
It's a convention used more or less exclusively by historians. Though referenced on at least one coin issue, the ab urbe condita date only impinged on daily life on those rare occasions when the emperors marked the anniversary of Rome's foundation. Claudius, for example, celebrated Rome's 800th birthday in 47 AD. 201 years later, Philip the Arab marked the city's millennium with a spectacular series of games. Although consular dating persisted into late antiquity, two new systems appeared. The first was the indiction, a 15-year tax cycle used widely for dating from the 4th century onward. This convention sometimes causes problems for modern historians, since the indiction cycles were not counted, and it can be unclear which year is being referenced.
Can you imagine if the IRS still used indiction? Every year, every 15 years, the IRS would come after you, being like, hey, what have you been doing for the past 14 years for your taxes? That means that you would only get taxed like 3 times in your career. Because if you start your career when you're 25, then you get taxed again when you don't have any money when you're 25. So you get taxed the first time when you're 40, the second time when you're 55, the third time when you're like 70.
The other new convention, which appeared in the 6th century, was formal dating by the emperor's regnal year. Far more important than either of these developments, however, was the rise of Christianity, which produced new means and motives for calculating a universal chronology. At first, Christian scholars focused on determining the date of the creation, a matter of practical interest, since some were convinced that the world would end 6,000 years after it was made. After much effusion of ink and ecclesiastical bile, Greek scholars settled on 5,509 BC as the beginning of time and dated their chronicles accordingly. From the early Middle Ages on,
That's crazy because that's still, I think, the Christian number that people use today when they're talking about how old the Earth is and when people refuse to get with the program about geological dating and evolution. There's 6,000 years old, which would imply that this number that they just gave, about 5,000 being the start of the Earth, and then that their 5,000 BC would say that the world would end in 1,000 AD, and we are 1,000 years past 1,000 AD. So they would have to, if the world is 6,000 years old, that means that the world is actually 4,000 BC.
Onward, however, thanks largely to differences between Greek and Latin texts of the Bible, scholars in Western Europe prefer to date around 4000 BC.
Oh, well, there you go.
Egyptian Christians preferred, and still prefer, to use the era of the martyrs, which began in 284 with the accession of Diocletian. The most important Christian contribution to chronology, however, occurred in the 6th century, when the AD system appeared. Its inventor was Dionysius Exiguus, an unassuming Roman monk noted for his mathematical ability. While computing the dates on which Easter would fall in the coming years, Dionysius devised a system for counting years from the birth of Jesus. He never intended to create a universal dating system, yet this, slowly and accidentally, AD became. AD caught on first in Anglo-Saxon England, thanks largely to the 8th century scholar Bede, who employed it in some of his works on chronology and history. It was widespread in France and Western Germany by the late 9th century, and common throughout Italy by the end of the 10th. The Spanish kingdoms had an era of their own and resisted AD until the 13th and 14th centuries. Even once the system had been generally adopted, AD dates were used almost exclusively in ecclesiastical and academic contexts until the early modern period. Remarkably, BC only became common in the late 18th century.
Interesting. I mean, it feels so old to us because everyone who's alive now uses BC and AD to count things. But it makes sense that for a lot of human history, time was counted in a different way. It's actually quite impressive that we've stayed consistent for 700 years about AD and BC, and then all have agreed upon it, broadly speaking, in the West.
Our friend Dionysius got his numbers wrong when estimating the date of Jesus' birth, which almost certainly did not take place in 1 AD. But that doesn't really matter. AD has never been, and was never meant to be, anything more than a convention. It is, however, a useful convention, at least for YouTube historians, and as we plunge into this chronological construct that we so blithely call 2022, I'd like to wish you all a happy and healthy New Year.
This looks like the craziest crossword puzzle ever. There's just like lines on lines on lines. You can see some of these like text up here. It looks so crowded because it's like they ran out of space. They were like, oh, we need to fill in this whole dude's name. Oh, well, we're chiseling away at actual stone, so we can't make it erase it if there's a problem. Pretty funny.
Thanks for watching.
Nice. Good stream. I'm gonna jump back to